Hey guys, today we're going to learn about the skin. So your skin is an organ because it contains all four types of tissues. It has epithelial tissue, connective tissue, muscle tissue, and nervous tissue, which makes it an organ. It's actually your largest organ by size and by mass. So it is a pretty important thing to learn about. First, let's talk about the functions of your skin. I like to use the acronym PTSD to remember all the four functions of the skin. They are protection against the external environment, thermoregulation to regulate our temperature so it stays within a set point, because if we vary too high or too low, then the proteins and enzymes in our body don't function very efficiently at their most efficient rate. They have to be within a certain temperature to function efficiently and correctly. Sensation means sensing touch, sensing pain. And D for vitamin D production, which is super cool because if you think about it, we're using the sun to produce a vitamin. And in this case, it's vitamin D. So your skin is made up of three main layers: the epidermis, the dermis, and the hypodermis. Dermis means skin, epi means above, dermis just means skin, and hypodermis means below the skin. The hypodermis is also called the subcutaneous layer. Subcutaneous layer. Or sometimes for short, it gets called the sub-Q. But that layer is made up of adipose tissue. Adipose means fat cells. So this is adipose. You might also hear me call this lipocytes. Same thing. Lipo means fat, cyte means cell. Lipocytes or fat cells, also called adipose tissue. This is going to be a very important layer of fat beneath our skin that's going to help us thermoregulate. It's going to keep us from losing heat to the surroundings. It's also going to help cushion us, especially if we bump against things. It provides some important cushion so we don't damage our internal structures. And in our dermis layer here, we have lots of different structures. The dermis layer in general is connective tissue. Remember, we talked about the different tissue types. The dermis layer is connective tissue. And so would the adipose tissue, because remember, fat cell adipose tissue is connective tissue also. The epidermis up above is epithelial tissue. The dermis is going to be made up of most of the structures that sense touch. It's also going to be our vascular layer, which means it has a blood supply. The hypodermis and the dermis both have a blood supply. The epidermis does not, so it's called avascular. So running through here, you're going to see arteries that are carrying oxygen-rich blood, and then veins, which are taking away carbon dioxide out from the skin after it's delivered its oxygen to the cells. And running through here, there's little tiny capillary beds. Capillaries are the tiniest blood vessels, and they're going to run throughout the skin. And after it drops off the oxygen, then it goes and returns to the vein to return to the lungs to pick up oxygen. All right, so let's go into some of the structures of the dermis. First of all, you have free nerve endings. So these are free nerve endings, and they're going to sense pain. And since they're sensing pain, they're going to be sending that information afferently. So this is going to be sent afferent. Then we have right here, this is called a Meissner's corpuscle, M-E-I-S-S-N-E-R''S. Corpuscle just means tiny body. A Meissner's corpuscle senses light moving touch. So if it's moving, then a Meissner corpuscle picks that up. And you remember that because it sounds like mice. Mice run around. Meissner's corpuscle, moving touch. Again, that one's going to be afferent because it's sensing. There's also, these are Merkel cells, Merkel. Merkel cells are actually based in the bottom layer of the epidermis. They are going to sense non-moving touch. You can remember that because Merkel sounds like murky, and murky water doesn't move much. So that's going to be afferent, since it is sensing. You have sweat glands. Sweat glands secrete sweat onto the skin to help us thermoregulate. As it sweats and it evaporates, it causes a cooling effect. So that's going to be efferent because it has an effect, right? Right here, you could probably guess this is a hair follicle, and your hair follicles are interesting. You have them on most of the parts of your body. You have parts of your body that do not have hair follicles. The palms of your hand, the soles of your feet, they don't have hair follicles, but they still have oil glands. So these right here, this is called a sebaceous gland. Sebaceous gland is also known as an oil gland. It secretes sebum or oil into the hair follicle, but it can also secrete directly onto the surface of the skin. That's why you have oil on your fingertips. Sebum is going to lubricate the skin, and it also has some antimicrobial properties. Right here, there is a tiny smooth muscle called an arrector pili muscle, and that's going to, when you get cold, it's going to create goosebumps and pull the hair up. Goosebumps decrease the surface area of the skin to help decrease heat loss, so that's going to help warm us up, part of thermoregulation. And arrector pili would be efferent because it's an effect. Also in here, along the blood vessels in the skin, we have what's called a glomus body. A glomus body is going to sense, the temperature, and then it's going to respond by having the veins or arteries, the blood vessels, constrict or dilate based on how cold or hot it is. If it's cold, they're going to want to constrict deeper inside of you, and if it's hot, they're going to want to dilate closer to the surface to get rid of the heat, right? And so that means the glomus body is both efferent because it's doing the effect to dilate or constrict, but also afferent because it's sensing the temperature. So this is unique because it's both afferent and efferent. Right here, this is a Pacinian corpuscle. Pacinian corpuscle is going to sense more deep pressure. Deep pressure, also vibrations and tickles are sensed by the Pacinian corpuscle, so that means it's going to be afferent, sending information to the brain. The hair follicle itself is lined by this base layer of the epithelium. So, but before I go into that, I do want to mention what the cells are that make up this dermis. The dermis is made up of cells called fibroblasts. It's made up of a lot of different cells. It's connective tissue. But a fibroblast makes something special. It makes collagen and elastin. Collagen is going to provide strength. So you find that it is used whenever we create scars, when our body forms scars, it's going to be mainly made of collagen. Also, elastin, fibroblasts make a protein called elastin that provides elasticity for the skin. So the main cell you need to know for the dermis is a fibroblast, and the main cell you need to know for the hypodermis is a lipocyte. Now, let's go into the epidermis. The epidermis is the top layer of the skin. In most of the parts of our body, it is made of 4 layers, except for the parts of our skin that do not have hair, the palms of our hands and the soles of our feet. Those areas have 5 layers to provide additional protection because they're high impact and high use, as you can imagine. So let's look at the layers right here. The base layer, this is the stratum basal, And this is the only layer. This is the only layer that is living, the only layer going through mitosis and dividing. This is also the layer where you're going to find melanocytes, and our Merkel cells. So we haven't talked about melanocyte. A melanocyte is a cell that makes a protein, a pigment called melanin. And melanin provides color for the skin and for hair. And if you look, the little melanocytes that are in the stratum basal around the hair follicle, they're providing the melanin that goes into the hair. If there's more melanin, then the hair is darker. If there's more melanin in the skin, then the skin is darker. People with darker skin and darker hair, they don't have more melanocytes. They have the same number as everyone else. Their melanocytes just produce more melanin based on their genetics, based on their inheritance. Moving up, the stratum spinosum is a layer of cells that have just been formed. These are called keratinocytes. They're called keratinocytes because they produce a protein called keratin. Keratin makes the cells tough and waterproof. Very important because we don't want water getting in and messing up our regulation of internal water. The stratum granulosum, stratum lucidum. Notice that I have a star next to it because this is the layer that's only present in the palms of the hands and the soles of the feet. It is not present in all the other parts of the body that have hair and hair follicles. And the top layer is the stratum corneum. The stratum corneum is all the cells, they're completely dead and they are very flat, and this is where they begin to flake off. Very helpful for our immune system because a bacteria can never attach and start to grow on our skin if we're constantly flaking off. That is a genius strategy for defense. That way nothing can ever really stay attached if we're constantly flaking off. It can never take hold. So the way that you can remember corneum, lucidum, granulosum, spinosum, basal is Clear Lake gets severely beaten. Clear Lake gets severely beaten. Corneum, lucidum, granulosum, spinosum, basal. Stratum just means layer. Okay, so we have our epidermis. You have your corneum, lucidum, granulosum, spinosum, basal. Except I just lied to you. There's a hair here, so we would not have a lucidum, would we? So it would be just corneum, granulosum, spinosum, basal. I think that's it.